B. There is a man crouched in the bushes of the most beautiful place that has ever existed. It is evening. Will B. The light has gone gold and low, the way it does just before the day lets go. A breeze moves through the trees of the garden. B. And somewhere in that breeze are footsteps. He has heard these footsteps 1,000 times before. He used to run toward them. Will B. He used to wait for them the way you wait for someone you love to come home. But not tonight. Tonight he is pressing his body into the leaves, holding his breath, trying to make himself small. B. There is a sour taste of fear in his mouth that he has never tasted before. B. His hands are sticky with the sap of fig leaves he has torn down and stitched together. Will B. Because for the first time in his life, he has looked down at his own body and felt that he needed to hide it. And then the voice comes. The same voice that called the light out of the darkness. B. The same voice that breathed into a pile of dust and made it sit up and become a man. The voice that named the stars. Will B. And the first thing that voice says, the very first thing God speaks to a human being on the other side of sin, is not thunder. B. It is not a sentence handed down from a throne. It is not a list of charges. It is a question. Where are you? B. Now stop. Because you already know something is strange here. This is God. The God who, 3 chapters earlier, B. spoke entire galaxies into existence with his breath. The God who knows the number of hairs on your head and the words on your tongue before you say them. B. That God does not lose track of one frightened man in a garden he planted himself. He knows exactly where Adam is. B. So why does he ask? Here's what most people miss. From the first page of the Bible to the last. B. The God who knows everything keeps doing the one thing an all-knowing God should never need to do. B. He asks questions. Hundreds of them. Where is your brother? What are you doing here? Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Who do you say I am? Do you love me? He asks the guilty. He asks the grieving. He asks the runaway. B. The prophet, the murderer, the fisherman. Will B. And not once, not one single time in all of Scripture does he ask, because he does not know the answer. B. So this is not a story about a quiz. This is not a story about a test. This is not a story about a God who forgot. Will B. This is a story about every time the God of the universe knelt down to a hiding, frightened B. broken human being and asked a question he already knew the answer to, and why that question was the most merciful thing he could have said. Hate. Will be, and it ends, 2,000 years later, by another fire, with another man hiding from the sound of footsteps. We will get to that fire. But not yet. For now, stay in the garden. Stay in the bushes with Adam. And listen to the question again. Where are you? There is a word underneath that question. In the Hebrew, where are you? Is one word. B. Aeka. And the rabbis who spent their whole lives leaning over these letters noticed something about it. B. Aeka is not the word you use when you've misplaced your keys. It is not a search. It is a summons. B. It is the sound a father makes standing in an empty doorway, not because he can't find the child, but because he wants the child to come out on his own. And here is the part that will stay with you. Will be those same Hebrew letters Aeka spell another word when you read them a little differently. Acha. Will be. And Acha is the first word of the Book of Lamentations. It means how. B. It is the cry of a people standing in the rubble of everything they loved. How? How did it come to this? The question God asks the sinner, and the cry the broken heart screams back at heaven in Hebrew. They are almost the same sound. B. As if from the very beginning, God's question and our grief were made to answer each other. So when God says Aeka, B. He is not collecting Adam's coordinates. An ancient Jewish commentary on Genesis says it plainly. God asked the question to give Adam the chance to repent, to open a door instead of slamming one. The God who had every right to come as a judge came as a voice in the cool of the day. B. Asking a man to simply tell the truth about where he was. And Adam, God help him, and God help us. Because we would have done the same. Adam blames his wife, and his wife blames the serpent. Will be. And the first family in history learns the oldest trick we know. When God asks where you are, point somewhere else. Hold that thought, because the next question comes fast. One chapter later, there are two brothers in a field, Cain and Abel. And Cain, the older one, the farmer, has just done something no human had ever done before. He has lifted his hand against his own brother and left him in the dirt. The first heartbeat to stop on this earth stopped because of jealousy. And God comes again and again. He does not lead with thunder. He asks, "Where is your brother Abel?" He knows. Of course he knows. Abel's blood is already crying out from the ground. The text says a phrase so haunting that people have repeated it for thousands of years. God knows exactly where Abel is. He is asking Cain the same way he asked Adam, not to find the body, but to find the heart. And Cain gives the answer that has echoed down every century since. I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? Look at what just happened. God asked Adam where Adam was, and Adam hid. God asked Cain where his brother was, and Cain lied. The question is a mirror, and both men hated what they saw in it. Because that is what God's questions do. They do not tell you something about God. They show you something about you. But it gets stranger. Because the next person God comes looking for with a question is not a patriarch, not a prophet, not a man at all. She is a slave. Her name is Hagar. She is Egyptian, foreign, pregnant. And she is running. Sarai has treated her so harshly that she has fled into the desert, alone. With a child in her body, and nowhere on earth that belongs to her. She is the lowest person on the social ladder of her entire world, a woman, a servant, a foreigner. Owned by someone else, carrying a baby into a wilderness that will most likely kill them both. And out there, by a spring of water on the road to Shur, the angel of the Lord finds her. And God, the God of the whole universe, asks this runaway slave girl a question with two halves. Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going? Stay with me. Because this is the tenderest question in the book of Genesis. He calls her by name. Nobody calls slaves by name. And then he asks her not just where she's been, the running, the pain, the master who hurt her, but where she's going. He asks about her future. He treats a woman the world counted as property, like a person with a story that matters. And Hagar does something no one in the Bible has done up to this point. She gives God a name. She calls him El Roy, the God who sees me. A throwaway slave in an empty desert becomes the first human being in all of Scripture to name the Almighty. And the name she gives him is built entirely out of the fact that he noticed her. That is the pattern beginning to form. Adam hid, and God asked where he was. Cain killed, and God asked where his brother was. Hagar ran. And God asked where she was going. 3 questions. 3 wheres. And not one of them was about a location on a map. Every single time, God was asking about the same place. Not the garden. Not the field. Not the desert road. The human heart. Before we go any further, I want you to notice what you're doing right now. You're still here. You've followed 3 questions across the opening pages of the Bible. And somewhere in the last few minutes, you probably felt one of them land a little too close. That's not an accident. These questions were never trapped in the past. They are still being asked. So if this is stirring something in you, do me a favor, subscribe, so the rest of these don't slip past you. And down in the comments, tell me one thing. Not a verse. Not a doctrine. Just this. Which question has God asked you? The one you've been pointing somewhere else to avoid answering. Leave it below. I read them. Because we are only 3 questions in. And the next ones don't come for a frightened man in a garden or a runaway in a desert. The next questions come for the strongest people in the Bible, a prophet who called down fire from heaven. A man who lost everything he had, and a preacher so angry at God's mercy that he wanted to die. And God is going to ask every one of them a question too. His name is Elijah, and he wants to die. B. This is the same man who, just one chapter earlier, B. stood alone on a mountain against 450 prophets of a false god, and called down fire from a clear sky, the greatest victory of his life. And now, a single day later, he is collapsed under a scraggly desert bush. Will be a day's walk into the wilderness, begging God to take his life. I have had enough, he says. Take my life. Will be. I am no better than my ancestors. The bravest man in Israel is suicidal in the span of 24 hours. B. If you have ever crashed hardest right after your highest moment, Elijah is your prophet. And God does not rebuke him. B. God lets him sleep. God feeds him. And then, when Elijah has walked 40 days to a cave on the mountain of God, B. the word comes. What are you doing here, Elijah? Notice God does not say what you'd expect. He doesn't say, get up, you coward. He asks, what are you doing here? And Elijah pours out his bitterness. I've served you. B. I'm the only one left, and now they want me dead. And God sends wind that splits rocks, and an earthquake. B. and a fire. But God is not in any of them. And then comes a sound the old translations called a still small voice. A whisper. A thread of silence with something living inside it. And then God asks the exact same question again. B. What are you doing here, Elijah? Here's the part nobody tells you. God asked twice on purpose. The first time. B. He let Elijah empty out all the anger, and the self-pity, and the exhaustion. He let the man say the worst of it. And then, after the whisper, he asked again, giving Elijah the chance to answer differently, from a quieter place. B. God's question wasn't an interrogation. It was patience wearing the shape of a sentence. B. He asked twice because he was willing to wait for the real answer. But the questions are about to get bigger. Much bigger. Because there is a man sitting in a pile of ashes who has lost more than anyone in the entire Bible. B. His name is Job. In a single day he lost his oxen, his sheep, his servants. B. And then the sentence you can barely read out loud. All 10 of his children, crushed in a house that fell on them at a feast. B. Then his health. He is scraping his own sores with a piece of broken pottery. His friends have talked at him for chapters. B. And Job has one demand. He wants God to explain. He wants a reason. He wants the universe to make sense. B. And finally God answers Job out of a whirlwind. But God does not give a reason. God does not explain a single thing. Will be instead, God asks Job a question. And then another. And then another. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Have you ever commanded the morning? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Can you bind the chains of the stars? B. 4. Will be. 4 solid chapters, nearly 70 questions. In a row God asks a suffering man about wild goats and ocean depths, and the wings of an ostrich, and lightning bolts that report for duty. B. And he answers none of them. Stay with me, because this is the strangest comfort in all of literature. B. Job asked God for an explanation, and got an avalanche of unanswerable questions instead. And it worked. B. By the end, Job says, I have heard of you with the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. He doesn't get his answer. B. He gets God. And somehow that is enough. That's the thing about God's questions. Sometimes they aren't meant to be answered at all. Will be. Sometimes the question itself is the gift, because a question that big can only come from a God big enough to be trusted with your grief. B. And then there is the last man in this wilderness. And honestly, he is the most relatable of all of them. B. Because he is just angry. His name is Jonah, and he is furious that God is merciful. God spared a city Jonah wanted destroyed. B. And now Jonah is sulking on a hillside, hoping to watch it burn anyway. God grows a leafy plant overnight to shade him. B. And Jonah loves it. Then God lets the plant die, and Jonah is so upset over a dead vine that he says, B. again, that he'd rather be dead. And God asks him twice, like, Elijah, is it right for you to be angry? And then God asks the question that ends the entire book. He points at the great city full of people who don't know their right hand from their left, And he says, B. Should I not have compassion on them? And then the book of Jonah just ends on the question. We never hear Jonah answer. Here's what most people miss. God left it unanswered on purpose, because that question was never really for Jonah. B. It was left hanging in the air for every single person who would ever read it, including you. Should I not have compassion? B. The Bible hands you the question, and then goes silent and waits to see what you'll say. 4 wilderness questions. Will be a prophet too tired to live, a man buried in grief, a preacher choking on his own resentment. B. And a God who met every one of them not with a lecture, but with a question, asked gently, asked twice, asked into the silence, and sometimes left wide open for us to finish. But there is one more set of questions. B. And for these, God does not speak from a whirlwind, or a whisper, or the cool of the evening. For these, B. God has a face. For 4,000 years of this story, God's questions came from somewhere you couldn't see. Will be a voice in a garden, a whisper in a cave, a storm. But now God is walking on a dusty road in sandals. And when he asks a question, you can watch his mouth form the words. And one day, he turns to his closest friends, B. in a place called Caesarea Philippi, and he asks them what people are saying about him. They give him the gossip. Some say John the Baptist. B. Some say Elijah. Some say one of the prophets. Easy question. Safe answers. And then he narrows his eyes and makes it personal. But who do you say I am? There it is, the hinge of the whole Bible. Every question we've heard, where are you? B. Where is your brother? What are you doing here? Has been circling this one. B. Because you can answer every other question about God from a safe distance. This one you cannot. This one walks right up to you and waits. B. Who do you say that I am? Peter blurts out the truth. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God, and nothing is ever the same again. But the most tender question Jesus ever asked. He asked a blind beggar by the side of a road. His name is Bartimaeus. B. And he is screaming. Jesus is passing through Jericho in a crowd. Will be. And this blind man is shouting his name so loudly that people tell him to shut up. He shouts louder. B. And Jesus stops. The whole procession stops for one beggar. And Jesus asks him a question that seems almost absurd. B. What do you want me to do for you? Think about that. The man is blind. Everyone can see he's blind. B. Jesus can see he's blind. Why ask? Here's the part that will stay with you. Because asking the man what he wanted gave him back something his blindness had taken. B. His dignity. For years people had decided things for Bartimaeus, talked over him, told him to be quiet. And the Son of God stops everything, turns to him, and lets him say out loud, in his own voice, what he longs for. B. I want to see. God already knew. He asked so the man could have the holy gift of asking. And now we come back to the fire. Remember the man hiding in the bushes at the very beginning, terrified of footsteps he used to love. I told you we'd come to another fire and another man hiding. Here he is. His name is Peter. And on the worst night of his life. B. While Jesus was being beaten in a courtyard, Peter stood by a charcoal fire and was asked 3 times if he knew the man on trial. Will be and 3 times to a servant girl, of all people the strongest of the disciples, said no. I don't know him. B. I don't know what you're talking about. 3 denials by a fire. Then a rooster. Then Peter went out and wept like his chest was breaking. B. Now it is days later. Jesus is alive, and on a beach at dawn. Peter sees him cooking breakfast over, and the Gospel of John uses the exact same rare word here that it used for the night of the denial, a charcoal fire. Will be. The smell alone would have taken Peter straight back to the worst thing he ever did. And Jesus asks him a question. B. Simon, do you love me? And he asks it 3 times. 1 for every denial. 1 mercy laid gently over every wound. B. And here is something you can only see in the Greek. The first 2 times, Jesus uses the word agape, the highest love. The love that lays its life down. And both times Peter, who can't make that claim anymore. B. Who has learned exactly what his big promises are worth. Answers with a smaller, humbler word file. B. The love of a friend. He won't overpromise again. And the third time, Jesus does the most beautiful thing in the entire gospel. B. He changes his word. He comes down to Peter's. He asks, Simon, do you follow me? Do you love me even as a friend? God reached all the way down to the only word a broken man had left, and called it enough. Now stand back and see the whole arc at once. Will be the first thing God ever asked a hiding man was, where are you? And the last thing Jesus asks a hiding man, by a fire that smelled like his failure, is, do you love me? These are not two different questions. B. Are the same question, asked across the entire length of the Bible. Where are you was never about a location. It was always God saying, come out of hiding. I still want you. And do you love me is that same voice. Will be that same outstretched hand, reaching into the same bushes, except this time God has come in person, all the way to the fire, to pull the hiding man out himself. This is not a story about a quiz. This is not a story about a test. This is not a story about a God trying to catch you. From the garden to the grave. B. It is the story of a God who keeps asking the hiding ones to come home. And maybe you already know this feeling. Even if you've never opened a Bible, maybe you've been the parent standing in the doorway of a room where something is broken, looking at a child who has chocolate on his hands and terror in his eyes, and you ask what happened here. Not because you don't know. You know exactly what happened. You ask because you want him to come out from behind the lie on his own. Will be you ask because the question is a door, and you are holding it open. And everything in you is hoping he will walk through it toward you instead of away. That is the voice in the garden. B. That is the voice by the fire. That has always been the question. Not what did you do? Not how could you? B. Just where are you? Come out. I'm right here. So let me leave you with three things. The first is this. B. God never once asked a question because he needed the answer. Not in the garden. Not in the field. Will be not in the desert. Not in the whirlwind. Not by the fire. He knew where Adam was. He knew where Abel was. He knew what Bartimaeus wanted and how many times Peter would fail before the rooster ever crowed. Every question God has ever asked, he asked already knowing. The asking was never for him. The second is this. If the asking was never for God, then it was always for the person he was asking. And it was never a trap. B. We spend our whole lives assuming that if God speaks to us, it'll be to catch us, to corner us, to read the charges. Will be. But look at the evidence. He asked Adam so Adam could confess. He asked Hagar so she'd know she was seen. He asked Job so Job could meet him. He asked Peter so Peter could be restored. The question is not a net thrown over you. It is a door held open for you. Every time. And the third thing is the one I really want you to take with you tonight. B. The question he asked the first frightened man in the first garden, he is still asking it. He is asking it right now. By name of you. Not what have you done. Not how could you. Just two words. B. Spoken in the cool of the evening into whatever bushes you've been hiding in. Where are you? B. And after 4,000 years and a cross, and an empty tome, you finally know what that question means. It doesn't mean you're caught. It means you're wanted. It means the footsteps you've been afraid of are the footsteps of someone who came all the way down to a charcoal fire to pull you out by the hand. B. You are allowed to answer him. You are allowed to step out of the trees. So before you go, do one thing for me. B. Tell me down in the comments which of God's questions hit you the hardest. Where are you? Where is your brother? B. What are you doing here? Do you love me? One of them found you tonight. I'd like to know which one. B. Because he is still standing in the garden. He is still asking. And he is still waiting for you to step out from behind the leaves. B. And walk toward the voice, and finally say, here I am.